Welcome back to the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast. One of the hosts identifies as a sleeper pick because he naps 12 hours a day. That's Lenny. I'm Mina Kimes. Speaking of sleeper picks, I am joined for what I am now comfortable saying is an annual tradition. My yearly Combine pod where I bring on the great Mike Renner, who gives me names he's excited to watch at the Combine, excited to watch generally. But this is, of course, Combine Week. We are both in Indianapolis. Mike, welcome back to... Are you ready to take a victory lap, by the way? I brought back some of the names that you've given me over the years.
I don't do victory laps anymore. It's if people want to point it out elsewhere, but like I don't do victory laps because I don't want to do like, oh, I got this dead wrong laps either.
The walk of shame.
There you go. The walk of shame.
A draft walk of shame.
I'm glad if someone points out either way to admit right or wrong. But it's like, if you're a draft analyst, it's like trying to predict the future. You're just not going to do it well. And so it's more about having fun with it and getting excited to watch these players.
You're not on here, by the way, to be clear, to say these are the next stars and the guys you should draft and all that. These are players you're interested in watching. However, I do want to point out that some of the players you have encouraged me to watch ahead of the Combine have gone on to become really fun and interesting NFL players. Like last year, looking at our DMs, honestly, they're the names, like big names like Cooper DeJean. Wasn't exactly like no one was talking about Cooper DeJean, but even guys like a Peyton Wilson or Chop Robinson, even Johnny Wilson got reps for the Eagles. Like these are guys who almost every player you sent me last year, even Vaki, ended up playing snaps in the NFL. So, and then to go back the year before, I mean, Keaton Mitchell is always going to be your claim to fame on this pod and also in my Dynasty League with Danny Kelly, in Nate Tice, where I drafted him. But like DeJuan Jones, Nick Herbig, like those have gone on to be pretty damn good players.
I'm trying to highlight, I think when I say like a guy I like watching, it's a guy that doesn't fit the typical mold, right? I mean, there's guys that you like watch and everyone will agree this is a first rounder, right? This is a top 25 guy. Like there's not like differing opinions on. But I feel like I try to come on here and the guys I like highlighting before the Combine are the guys where like they are distinctly different in some way, shape, or form from what's usually at their position. And will it work? I don't know. But it's guys that take a little bit more inspection than your run-of-the-mill guy that just like ticks every box.
That's right. Because a lot of these guys, I just wrote, he's really big and he's really small, like as I was watching them. So that sort of fits the bill. Some freaky athletes in here. Really quickly, you guys should check out Mike's draft coverage leading up, obviously during the Combine, but beyond that, you have a podcast with Kyle Long called Push the Pod, pardon me, right? Or
Pushing the Pile Pod.
Pushing the Pile Pod.
Too many P's.
Real tongue twister. And then you're also doing the draft for CBS Sports. So check that out. Check him out on social media platforms as he continues to break it down. And let's get to it. Okay, so let's start with Dillon Gabriel, the quarterback that you sent. This is not a very rich... Actually, but wait, sorry. I did want to ask you before we got into the specific players. I said, which positions you feel are strongest overall as we head into the Combine?
I think there's three that really stand out that are different classes year on year that you're not always going to get. It's running back, it's tight end, and it's defensive end. I think it's also like a good DT class, but those top three that I mentioned in particular are like different classes. I think this tight end class could have, like 2 years from now, I think you could have over a quarter of the league starters. There could be like 7 or 8 guys from this tight end class that are starters in the NFL, which obviously one draft class produces that many. That's a loaded draft class. Running back as well. I think you get at least a half dozen starters from this class day one, which is just, that doesn't happen every single year. And the defensive end, we'll be talking about it night one of the NFL draft. It could be like a third of the round one picks could be defensive ends. So it is, those three classes, those three positions are just like, they have top end guys, they got depth, they really have it all. So those three positions are ones that you'll probably hear a lot of throughout the top 75 picks.
Tight end is going to be fascinating too, because we're coming off of a couple of drafts now where you've had tight ends taken in the early rounds who have not produced immediately, which was not the case for, it's for a while thought, rookie tight ends, it's such a complicated position. It takes these guys a second. And there's, I think, a litany of reasons for that. Some of it is usage and the way offenses have evolved, but I have to think this year's class will benefit from the success of your Brock Bowers, your Sam Laportas. And it is an awesome, there's like 4 or 5 tight ends that like I would be racing to draft in both the real draft and in fantasy, because I think there's some really, really incredible players. The one you sent is fascinating, and I cannot wait to get to him because I don't know what to make of him, and we'll get to that. But we're gonna start with the quarterback. So I mentioned this. So you did not list quarterback as a position that is rich in this draft. I think at this point everybody is pretty aware of that. And after you get past Ward, Sanders, potentially Dart, now inching up, and I'll get into those guys, of course, in more detail, you're getting to kind of this middle class of quarterbacks. And you named one of them, Dillon Gabriel out of Oregon. If you're watching this, listening to this, you've probably watched Dillon Gabriel because he's played so much damn college football. Actually, I think like
the most.
Yeah, right? Like legit, actually.
Yes.
Maybe was like Case Keenum, or I mean, he's got to be up there.
He's played the most college football in terms of starts. He has 63 starts. He broke Bo Nix's record. You literally couldn't do it before this because of the 6 years. Because he played 6 years of college football and started for 5 of them, broke his collarbone in another. So he played more college football than anyone else. Do
you think that, because I talked about how maybe the tight ends will benefit or whatever, do you think Gabriel, who's 24, right?
Right.
Will benefit from the fact that these older quarterbacks have had, speaking of, you mentioned Bo Nix, Jane Daniels last year, have had success in the NFL recently?
I think it's a trend that will only continue. I mean, just this class on the whole, you have Gabriel 6 years, you have Cam Ward 5 years as a starter, Shedeur Sanders 4 years, Jackson Dart 4 years as a starter. Like this class uniquely, even if it's not guys who are uber talented, it is guys who are uber experienced. And obviously Gabriel right at the top of that. Tyler Shuck from Louisville too, 6 years. He's already 25 years old, that guy, or will be 25 years old here soon. So like they are experienced, and I think that's a good thing for the NFL. I think the Zach Wilsons of the world, the Trey Lances of the world were failed by the system that dropped them into the NFL game and said sink or swim. I think guys need to develop at the pace they're ready to develop at, especially at that position, and especially from like a confidence perspective. These guys now know that they have basically mastered college football. Like they have, at the end of the day, they can walk in the NFL and say, I was good enough there, I should be good enough here. And with Gabriel especially, I think a lot of the reasons that you worry about older quarterbacks or like older players in general in college football is that they needed the physical advantage to be good at that level, that they weren't already good. With Dillon Gabriel, he was a true freshman, and he had 3,600 yards, 29 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions as a starter. Like he was good from day one, over 9 yards per attempt as true freshman. So that really didn't apply to him. And I think over the course of his career, you saw him get bigger, you saw him get stronger, and his arm at 5'10", 202 is one of the best arms in this draft class. There's not a lot of guys whose arm strength, I think, is stronger than Shedeur's. I think it's at least as strong as Jackson Dart's. Like he has a real arm. And it's not only that he played a ton of college football, he played a ton of high school football too. He has the Hawaii State passing record for yardage, and there's been some good quarterbacks coming out of Hawaii, whether it's Tua, whether it's Mariota. So this guy is like, I think he could play day one. The intriguing thing about him is I don't know if he's, with these short quarterbacks, I don't know if their ceilings are where the NFL wants them to be. And I think you're running into that with Bryce Young. You're running into that with Kyler Murray. You're running into that with guys like, Brock Purdy. Like their ceiling's just going to be tough. But they can play in the NFL. And if you could play in the NFL, for me, Dillon Gabriel can play in the NFL. If you can start and be the 20th best quarterback in the NFL for $2 million a year or whatever it's going to cost, that still has a ton of value. So that's kind of where I see Gabriel, is that this guy can play in the league.
Okay, lot said there, one of which is that he's 5'10", 202, which because I saw him listed. I didn't look at this, the latest measurables, but to kind of connect us to the combine, there's going to be a lot of talk about size, speed, all of those things. He is small, and he looks small on the field. He is not like Bryce Young, small, like I don't want to say frail, slim. He is more Russell Wilson. He's not quite as dense as Russ. He's sturdy though, and he can move well. But the size shows up on tape, like that. If he's hitting the middle of the field, it's play action, and he's got an expanded throwing window. He struggles with interior pressure, and there have been moments where, similar to Russ and your Sam Howell and your Bryce, whatever, the small guys, he doesn't see something over the middle of the field and he'll scramble. So that is no doubt a detriment. But you mentioned a lot of other things that I think struck me watching him this year. First of all, I think he's so much of a better quarterback than he was earlier in his career, and this is a guy again who we've all watched a lot. And I really did feel in Oregon, you saw some improvement, particularly his play under pressure, which was always my biggest kind of question about him. He was a little bit panicky. I thought he developed a much more calm pocket presence. So I like that a lot. And I like, I do think I am interested in seeing him throw, to go back to the combine again, because you hit on something, which is, this is not it's not a good quarterback draft already. It's not a good arm draft. Like,
Yes.
just outside of Ward, none of these guys can, like, there's no one who's there's no, your Richardsons, your Allen, whatever. There just isn't. So this year, I really thought at Oregon, yes, a lot of that offense is schemed up, but he hit a lot of the difficult NFL throws, the hole shots, the outbreakers, and he was able to drive it in a way that I do think gives him the opportunity to stand out.
Yes, and that's why I'd like him to throw too. And I think obviously he will. He's not, Cam Ward doesn't have
Nothing to lose here.
Yeah, I think Dillon Gabriel should, because he spins it well too. Like, one of the things Aaron Rodgers said that about what he looks at first when evaluating quarterback play is how the ball comes off their hand. He said guys that at a really high level, to get to the highest level, they have to have a spinny release and the way they flick it. And you have to get that consistent spiral to really be, consistently accurate quarterback at the NFL level. And with Dillon Gabriel, you just see it. I mean, like, guys like CJ Stroud, you see it. There's guys where it's just like that guy only throws spirals, and that tends to be the more accurate quarterbacks around the league. And with Dillon Gabriel, it's like he really spins it. So he has a chance to stand out from that perspective, just throwing against the other guys there in Indy.
Yeah, the Ohio State game is one where I probably listed like 5 or 6 throws that I really felt like, okay, I can see an NFL player in this game. There was like a 3rd and 10.
First one, like, not the second one.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, to be clear. Like just some real tight window throws in collapsing pockets, some really good balls there. I think the size thing is just, that's a big question for me always. But I definitely see, at least I would be really intrigued by him as a developmental option if I'm especially a team with an entrenched starter. Just a team that uses a lot of play action. I could see I could identify a lot of teams that I think definitely should take a look at him. So I'm excited to see him throw. Okay. This is of all the players you sent me, this is the one where I think I came out of this and like just was like, I'm reshuffling my rankings, and I'm obsessed with Dylan Sampson. Oh my God. His tape is so good. It's so awesome. Yeah. Just get into why you love him, and then I am so into this player.
With Dylan Sampson, he is the guy who, in my opinion, has the Tennessee running back. Yeah, so he's only 20 years old too. He might be actually the youngest guy in this class. He doesn't actually turn 21 until next season, like literally during the season. So he's super young. But he's one of those guys where if you just watch his highlights, I don't think it does him a service. You really have to watch every single run. And the fact that this guy just maximizes. He has this innate ability to find the gap wherever it is, get to that gap. He's in this mold of, there's kind of this new wave of running backs that aren't the most physically gifted, right? Kyron Williams, Bucky Irving come to mind, where they were barely scraping 200, 5'10". You look at him and you're like, that's a bell cow running back. And then you just watch them run, and it's like, oh, they just never make mistakes. With Williams fumbles, but like they don't make mistakes in terms of like the holes they hit. They don't make mistakes in terms of their run pacing. Like, they are just very, very clean backs and run hard, man. And I think the biggest thing with him, because again, he's barely scraping 200 pounds. You see his frame and you're like, is that going to work at the next level? And then he will try to run through a defensive tackle. Like, he will legitimately stick his nose into a defensive tackle's chest. And I'm like, that works. Like the guy that runs that hard, that works at the next level. So I have him as my running back 2 in this draft class, just because I know really? For a fact that he will be a good back at the next level. He just will be.
Impossible for me to imagine him not translating. I just say that, like, I'm not. So many thoughts. One of the things I loved was I wanted to watch him against good defenses, Georgia, Alabama, and those were games. He was awesome in those games. I really like what you said about you having to watch every down, because he really is an every down back. It's not, his numbers are not being skewed by a few explosives, although he has those in his bag. He can hit that second gear and explode. But it really, his ability to press and then force missed tackles and stay on his feet is remarkable, I think. I feel like Greg Roman is going to have to be physically restrained from drafting this kid because he's a perfect Greg Roman back. That was it was a lot of gap runs.
Yes.
I think he can do
so good
both.
in that scheme.
But yeah, I would absolutely want him for a gap scheme team. If there is a question, and I think if there's a reason why he doesn't go like super high, it's probably just a lack of pass receiving production. If you're like, oh, he's not a Jahmyr Gibbs, we can't use him in the pass game. I don't really have a thought. I mean, maybe that was my only question for you, really. He can pass protect, that I thought, but do you think he has the ability to catch passes, or do you think it doesn't matter?
We'll see at the combine. I mean, that's why I want to watch him in the receiving drills at the combine. Because again, we don't get featured much. Sometimes it's with Tennessee. I'm pretty sure it's because of the offense. They're not throwing to the running backs. They basically a lot of times they do this play action stuff where he just kind of sits in the pocket and looks for something. Even not against blitzes. They just add that 6 protector in there. And so we hung in a lot of stuff like that. Where in the NFL he'd be going out for a check down, and if he just gets the ball in space, though, that's why he's the type of back that. He just needs to catch swings and screens, and this guy can make a big impact. He doesn't need to be out running routes, even though I think he's fully capable of doing so. We just need to see what his hands look like.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I didn't thought about seeing him in the receiving drills. That's that will be interesting to me as well. He might be. I was thinking about how when I said I was kind of reshuffling. I didn't have a strong feeling about behind Gene T, where everyone should be ranked, but I was kind of just how high could the next back go? I think that's been my issue. And so much of it depends on where Ashton falls.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really hard to project right now. But I don't really think he's that far behind him, which is crazy. I just think this kid is so good. Okay. Moving on. Let's go defense. So you had Shemar Stewart, who is, I alluded to this. I just wrote, holy gigantic over and over. Gigantic edge rusher out of Texas A&M. You mentioned that this is a very deep edge group. I've seen rankings all over the place, honestly, outside of obviously Abdul Carter at the top. So maybe start off by saying where you view him in your sort of edge rankings and why you're interested in him in the combine in particular.
Yeah, so this edge class has a lot of freak athletes. If we go to the combine, the guys that are going to draw the most headlines are, to me, in the edge class. Stewart's going to be one of them. After Carter, it really is who you have second. There's one of 6 guys that I've seen be second best defensive end, depending on who you talk to. It's truly the evals are all over the map. One, because not a lot of guys put together really dominant tape. There's not a lot of guys who are polished edge rushers with high-end tools that are just outside of Abdul Carter. Yes, exactly. So there's not a lot of those guys.
That was my feeling as well.
But Stewart is the highest end athlete, but the lowest end production.
Yeah.
So there's this mix of guys who have high end traits, some production, whatever. He's all the way at the top of the athletic spectrum, but all the way at the bottom of the production spectrum. He's 6'5", 281. And watching his tape, it would not surprise me if he ran the 4.4s. He is truly a different caliber of explosive. I've not seen a guy that big, that explosive. Myles Garrett's probably the last one. It just even came close to what he looks like. That being said, he had never had more than a sack and a half in the season at Texas A&M. He ranked 217th among edge rushers nationally in tackles. He just didn't make plays, this guy. So one of the most god tier 5-star athletes to ever grace a collegiate football field. And you watch the tape and you're just when's it gonna translate to something? And so that's why he's the biggest head scratcher for a lot of people, because it doesn't take much when you are that special. If you can just learn how to long arm bull rush, you can be an all pro, just learn one move. Rashawn Gary did. So
he tries a long arm. I noticed that.
Yeah. More often than not, it doesn't work though, unfortunately.
Yeah. And he gets pressure. He doesn't finish.
Yeah.
I guess my question for you is, because you kind of summed up pretty neatly what his tape looks like. Where are you at generally on the production versus productivity debate when it comes to pass rushers? Because the example that I think haunts everybody right now is the Jags taking Trevon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. And they were sort of the prototypical, how much does athleticism matter? Trent
Mhm.
Baalke picked that, and he chose poorly. Do you think like are we over indexing if we put too much on that, or like how has this played out in recent years in your mind?
It's tough because it's case by case basis, in my opinion. You have to wonder, you basically have to get to the why a guy didn't produce. Because I think Michael Williams from Georgia is going to be another guy in this draft class that people are like, he didn't produce much. I watched the role he played on tape, and he
I was just
was,
about to say that defense is so unique. Yeah.
yes. And it's like, I don't think he was going to produce much. And I think he has at least an understanding of how he fit into the defense and then how to attack blocks from there. When I watched Stewart's tape, I just think he was just kind of a chicken with his head cut off, running blind a lot of times. And that's why he didn't produce, was that he didn't really understand his role in the defense and like where plays were going on the opposite side of the ball and like where I need to get to because of that. With Walker, I saw Michael Walker from Georgia. I saw much more Michael Williams. Gosh, I was thinking Jalen Walker. Michael Williams, a lot of Walkers and Williams there in Georgia. But he uniquely, I thought, like, already knew how to attack blocks. Like, he knows it. He just maybe isn't completely advanced in it. So it really is a case by case basis how you handle these guys. I think you need to see some semblance of understanding to their game, some semblance of processing to their game to really buy in. But I also think production at the end of the day, you want the guy that's productive on a collegiate football field who then has traits that are capable of winning. You don't need to have the top end, most traits of all time. And just because you have that doesn't mean you'll be a great edge rusher. It helps, but it doesn't mean you'll be a great edge rusher. But you definitely, if you're wanting to limit your risk exposure, you want the guy who's already done it on a collegiate football field. We saw that last year with like Jared Burris. He just ticked all the boxes.
Well, you were one of the players. I don't think I mentioned this at the top that you highlighted last year was Chop Robinson, who was a traits over production guy, just outrageous get off in college, and that certainly translated. Like he was awesome his first year. So it's so tricky, right? I think your point about role is really significant. Like really trying to dig into what are they asked to do in this defense? How many pass rush opportunities are they getting? What alignments are they rushing from? Are they taking advantage of those? I don't know if I have an answer with Stewart right now. But I think you're right to highlight him because he is a guy, like if he goes to the combine and puts up, Walker style crazy numbers, somebody, it's not gonna be Baalke, but somebody is gonna want those traits. Yeah,
yes.
right. I am still so torn on my edge rankings. I was even on NFL Live today, somebody was like, who should the Saints take? The Saints are an obvious edge candidate at pick 9, I think, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. Like I just, I actually mentioned both Georgia players, and then I was like, but they're so different. And also they got a new defensive coordinator, Brandon Staley, just announced they were hired today. Like Williams was he would have been the obvious Saints guy, just in terms of like profile historically. But I'm like, maybe they want to move up, maybe they want more speed and versatility. I truly don't know. I think it's going to be, as you said, like a very pick your flavor type of edge rusher draft.
Who would you right now edge to? Who would you have to say? You don't have to be held to this. I'm just curious.
I think with the right defensive coordinator, Jalen Walker's gonna be a superstar.
Okay. He's my edge too as well.
Okay, cool. I think if he lands in the wrong spot though and is misused, I could look very dumb for saying that.
I don't think you could misuse him. I mean, like there's obviously misuse him. I think you just let him rip and rush the passer. But I think wherever he plays, that guy he knows how to play football.
Jumps off the tape for me. Like I just, Parsons comparison is heresy, but like I just feel like, let me rephrase that. If you're a defensive coordinator and you don't know how to use a player with those tools, you're a bad coach. So that I would take him. I like the idea that he's different from who the Saints have had. They need speed, they need youth, they need versatility. So anyways, I'll get in. I'm so excited to dig into these players because there are a lot of really, really good ones. Okay, Kyle Williams. Let's do him next. Go back to, he's a receiver from Washington State. I saw him listed at like 20 different heights. Do you know what size is he?
5'10" and I think a quarter 182. Okay. But he had like a 6'1" wingspan, so he's on the smaller side.
He is smaller. He doesn't look super small to me on the field though. I don't know. That's why I was kind of like, I wonder what he'll measure at, because I wasn't looking at him thinking like tiny. I just didn't feel that way. I'd watched him versus UW, and I was he just didn't register for me. But after you mentioned him, the game I went and watched was Boise State, and he definitely registered in that game. Why did you? I am curious why you picked him though for a combine specific. I mean, he's obviously incredibly athletic.
I think I think he has the best combine of any wide receiver there. I watch his tape and I don't see another guy in this draft class at receiver that has his level of like juice. And that's what everyone's searching for. So I can't believe I've seen a lot of top 100 lists where this guy's isn't even listed. And I'm like,
Really?
are we watching the same tape? I watched this guy and last year, 70 catches, 1,196 yards, 14 touchdowns, 21 broken tackles. And I thought that was like a low end for him in terms of what he could have done. He just gets open. I mean, his GPS, his mile per hour at the Senior Bowl was the fastest of any wide receiver in attendance. His drop rate over the past 2 years is only 5.8%. He has good hands. I see like a Darnell Mooney type. Obviously, Mooney was a day 3 guy, but just good luck trying to stick with this guy down the football field. He's just too explosive. And I think at the Senior Bowl, he really showed he can run more of the underneath route tree as well. He's not pigeonholed in this pure deep threat. Like he ran like whip routes. He ran slants that were just gobs of separation. So of pure separators in this draft class, I don't think there's a better one. He's tiny, but I don't think there's a better one.
He actually had that, watching him, that I got that Zay Flowers tape feeling where in a few ways, he's not quite as twitched up, but where he would get super open very quickly and then have to come back because his quarterback was so bad.
Yeah.
A lot. Do you remember that with Flowers? Like at BC, I was just like, oh my God. Like, and he would just have to come back for like these horribly underthrown balls constantly. And that's a lot of that. I mean, the quarterback play, but I think just the openness is what jumped out to me and like is arguably the most important thing for a receiver. I think polish maybe in terms of like expanding the route tree, and you talked a little bit about some of the underneath stuff he did the Senior Bowl, is probably something he'll have to like improve a little bit at the next level. But in terms of getting open, tracking the football, good hands, I feel like he has all of that. So that's interesting that you think. I haven't thought about the wide receivers generally in terms of like who are the true speedsters. Are there like who are the other super fast guys in this group?
Isaiah Bond is like really the only one that comes to mind. There's not a lot. Jalen Noel from Iowa State. There's not a lot of guys that I'm predicting because before the combine every year I write down all the top guys 40s and predict just to like hone my eye. Not a lot of guys I put in the 4.3s, truthfully. Honestly, after that, of like the top guys, I think Emeka Egbuka might run the fastest 40 of the top guys. I think like Ted McMillan, Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden. I think Egbuka might be the fastest. Him or Burden, they're both I have around like the 4.4 range, but not a lot of like last year when we saw Brian Thomas go low 4.3s, Adonai Mitchell go 4.3s, Malik Neighbors go 4.3s, Xavier Worthy go 4.2s. It's like it ain't that class. It just is not that for speed.
It's not that class generally too. I mean, I'll get into it, but I have
not been
not
like
a lot
of those classes.
Yeah. Well, but in just generally too, this receiver class has not really personally gotten me that excited. So yeah, if he comes out to the combine, like you said, and just like lights it on fire, maybe that would get some people. Speed is the one thing we have seen. If a receiver can come to the combine and run really, really, really fast, that gets more people to watch him and pay attention. So I like that suggestion. All right, let's wrap with a guy who is almost definitely going to go in the first round. Well, I don't know. Actually, I haven't checked mocks, but Kelvin Banks Jr., right, would be pretty shocking if he. Where on average is he being mocked right now?
He's all over the place. I've seen him anywhere from number 4 to the Patriots all the way down to the mid 20s. So.
Okay.
So I mean, like a lot of guys in this class, right? There's not a lot that you're just like, oh, he's definitely a top 10 or definitely top 15. So really could go a lot of ways.
Yeah, I don't feel confident outside of like maybe 5 or 6 players at this point, but I still have to dig into. I haven't gotten to a lot of positions. So sorry, he is a offensive tackle, Texas. So this was an easier one for me because I just have just so much Texas guys. So I've watched a lot of Texas. I think my question for you, starting, and maybe this is why you singled him out. Do you think he's a guard or a tackle? Because he's 6'4", 320. I'm guessing his arms don't look super long. I'm guessing that'll be a plot point also that emerges here.
I think somewhere in the 33-inch range, which again, you like 34. The amount of guys though doing it between 33 and 40 is immense at this point, that you're not moving a guy inside just because of that. There's even a couple below 33 now in the NFL. Like, it's hard. I think Braden Smith might be the only one, but it's difficult, but it can happen. With Banks, though, I watch his tape. I have him OT1, and I'm just in awe of the athlete.
Above Campbell.
I have him above Campbell because I think athletically and just like the physical profile, physical makeup is the closest thing that I've seen to Tristan Wirfs. It reminds me so much of Tristan Wirfs because of the hip explosion. Just like, to me, there's like two different aspects of kind of like power along the offensive line. There's like strength, which is manipulating guys with like upper body, being able to absorb a blow. And then there's hip explosion, which is like truly like when you can get onto a guy, how much can you then drive? Like, explode the hips and move a guy against his will off the ball. And I see Kelvin Banks, and I see that level of hip explosion that I saw from like Tristan Wirfs, where when he hits a guy and starts to run, it's just different. It just has a different element to it that usually you just don't see from guys, 315, 320. He's not a massive tackle, but he hits guys and they move. And he's only 20 years old. He's been starting since his true freshman year. Over 1,500 pass blocking snaps, only 34 career pressures. So like, there are weaknesses to his game, don't get me wrong, but like, as an athlete, I expect him to high vertical, long broad jump. Like, he's just going to crush the metrics you want to see crushed along the offensive line position. Because of that, when you're that good of an athlete, like, you keep the guy at tackle. There's so few of them. You might as well keep him at tackle.
Yeah, I guess I to me, that was more just like a measurables thing. I never felt like he was like the arms didn't really show up on tape to me too much. Worse is a lofty comparison. I hear you, and I think that the athleticism testing will be interesting for that reason. I don't know if like I saw the same like nastiness necessarily in the run game particularly, but he's a very calm player. I thought he held up really well against high level competition. This is going to be a refrain for me, like, just because getting to see these guys go up against your Georgias, your Michael Williams, who did get him, I think, once for like a strip sack, but like the Ohio States and hold his own, that matters. Like, I just feel so much more comfortable with a plug and play offensive tackle like that, having seen him play really, really well and consistently at a high level. So that's going to be a really interesting OT1 debate, because I think everyone's kind of assuming the Patriots are locked on OT1.
That Michael Williams rep from Texas was one of the reasons I was like sold on him, because it was such like a nice pass rushing move that he did. I don't know if you remember, but he goes like two-hand swipe to the edge, and I was like,
that game too, dude. I was watching that and I was texting with a friend of mine who's a Georgia fan. I was like, I don't know about Williams. I was like, he's not really doing much. I know they're not asking him to do much, but like, it's just kind of like power. And I was like, whoa, like, okay, I was not familiar with your game. Like, I was like, okay, let me like revisit some of this. Yeah, but
OT1, Campbell is the better football player right now. Campbell looks like he has been playing offensive tackle like since he was, like one of these guys who just gets it. He has the innate skill of the position down better than any of these other guys, but he's not the specimen that Kelvin Banks is. I don't think he's going to. He's not going to test poorly. Don't get me wrong, but he is not a guy who looks like the freak athletes that ultimately are like the all pros. There's a reason Lane Johnson, Trent Williams, Tristan Wirfs, the guys who tested probably better than any other offensive tackles in NFL history, are the guys who are playing tackle at the highest level. It's just like sometimes that's what it takes to really get to that. And I think Banks is the closest I see in this draft class to that archetype.
It's interesting looking at the draft board, by the way, because the Patriots are the very obvious tackle team, but outside of them, in the top 10, the Bears, I guess. I think especially if they pay like a Trey Smith, maybe.
I've been throwing them to the Bears, to the 49ers, and sometimes to the Jets, but those three outside of the Patriots. I don't even know if the Patriots, at number 4, it's like there's some good guys at the top that aren't OTs, and they could use all of them, right? They could use it all.
That's the thing. I know the Patriots have so many needs on offense. It's like, all right, let's take a quick break, come back and talk about a guy who I think might be the most interesting player in the draft. All right, we're back. Harold Fannin Jr. So I, hand up, did not watch a single rep of this human before you directed, I'm kind coming to this stuff right after the Super Bowl. I am not watching Bowling Green football. I am not immersed in draft world. So before I pulled him up, I said, okay, well, like, what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about 1,555 yards. So that's crazy. Looking at some of his box scores, I'm just like, this is what? Like, I actually didn't watch the Penn State game during the college football season. So that's where I started because it's Penn State. I don't even like, okay. So the production is insane, obviously. He is, how tall is he?
6'3".
Okay. So he is not built like your typical tight end. I don't really know what he should do in the NFL. I want you to help me with this because he obviously should do something. He is a freak. He has unbelievable movement abilities. He is a playmaker. He is great. I mean, there's a lot to like about him, but I don't know what position he plays, and I don't know what team he should be on. So
100% agree. And I remember watching him during the season, and he's listed at 6'4", 230, and he went to the Senior Bowl with 6'3", 238. So I remember watching him in the season, though, I'm like, what is this supposed? What, like, this isn't anything that exists in the NFL. Like, this isn't just like that. He's too small to play tight end. He's a ridiculous move. Like, he moves kind of weird for a wide receiver. He is very duck-footed.
He moves like there's a kid at the controller in some ways too. Now, like, I mean, yes, he moves very weird. A lot of unnecessary jukes, but also a lot of cool jukes too.
Yeah, I mean, it works. He led college football in receiving yards this past year. He led college football in broken tackles this past year. He had almost 50% of Bowling Green's passing yards. I've never seen a tight end come close to that. I've not seen like a lot of wide receivers come close to that in modern college football. Like, he was just, they gave him the football every single play almost. And just because he was
lines up everywhere too.
Yeah. And he's only 20 years old. Like, the guy, his coaches, I mean, they rave about him, obviously, like the way they featured him. It's not hard to say, but his coach, Scott Loeffler, said he's never actually heard the ball hit his hands. He said every time the ball hits his hands, like, it's like so soft. The guy's great hands, 2.7% career drop rate. He also said that they thought about playing him at linebacker because he would be their best linebacker. He was that good, but they said they had to use him, keep him on offense because he was just so good. Like, this guy is a specimen, and he's going to run maybe high 4.4s, low 4.5s. Like, he is very fast at that size. I think my role and what I'm putting my flag out there and saying is I think he'll go higher than people expect. I think he will be one of these sharp teams will draft him and use him almost as a big slot wide receiver, because on the move, he's a great blocker. He's not an inline guy that's going to go one-on-one against defensive end, but like in space, locating linebackers, locating safeties. Like, when he got those guys matched up, he was actually an awesome blocker. Not just good. He was one of probably the best blocker in this draft class when just out in space. So if you draft him, he can do that. And he can get vertical on safeties really easily. The guy's so dynamic after the catch. The more I watch him, the more I'm just like, if you can craft basically that kind of slot role from him, where it's a vertical slot role with his size, where you can get mismatches because they almost have to treat him as a tight end, where then he's getting on safeties and whatnot, the guy gets open down the football field. It's unique, dude. But the more I watched him, I was just like, I think this will work. I think there's a world where this works.
The verticality is like the shocking. I mean, it stood out to me against Penn State, just his ability to work the seams and get open, and then the contact balance afterwards, the way he uses his frame. And the first guy never brings him down. I think, to your point, he is like a consummate mismatch guy. And he's the kind of player who is very misleading in personnel groupings because you're not really sure, like, he's kind of got that Ricardian, like, you don't know what they're doing when he's out there at any point, which is a very, very desired trait in the modern NFL, the ability to dictate to defenses that way with your groupings. Sean Payton looking at this guy.
I would love that. Yes, that's a great fit.
I mean,
like what they're doing with Isaiah Likely in Baltimore.
Yeah.
He can do that. And I think at a much higher level than even Isaiah Likely.
But yeah, I hear you. He's just a ball player. I don't really I could see this going so many different ways. I am excited to see him in person at the combine, though. I want to see kind of like his size and kind of get a sense of that, and I want to see how he moves out there. But yeah, I think he's going to be one of the more interesting because there's, like you said, this is a really stacked tight end class. But I do think it's kind of almost wrong to think of him as like a tight end in like,
he's his own third thing. Yeah,
yeah,
he's his own like separate category.
Yeah,
but I agree. It is.
It is. He's kind of like Derwin James of offense. I don't know. Okay, let's go back to defense. The rest is we got a bunch of defensive guys. David Walker was really fun to watch. Again, another player who I was not familiar with before you mentioned him. Another edge. So I should start by reading his numbers because they're insane. Central Arkansas, so small school guy. Played 12 games, had 55 pressures, 23 TFLs, 12 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, which is crazy. So we should probably start there. He's small. So yeah, that was
He's short. He's not small.
Short. Sorry, he's short. He is short. he is short. He's short. So I guess my question for you is kind of, do you feel like this was a guy beating up on small school competition, or do you think there's something there?
Well, I definitely feel like he was beating up because I've never seen tape as dominant as his at like any draft level.
It is actually like really funny to watch because it almost looks like he's like a guy playing with like his little brothers out there.
Yes. It felt like, I mean, it looks like a 5-star recruit in high school where they're just doing whatever they want. And it's
he wins so quickly every time too. It's just crazy.
Because, I mean, his body type does not exist, has not existed in the modern NFL. I've at least in my memory, he's 6 foot tall, 267 pounds. Brandon Graham was 268 coming out, but was an inch taller, had almost an inch longer arms. He is a weird build, but you talk to a lot of the only guy shorter than him who plays edge in the NFL right now is Dennis Gardeck. So not a lot of precedent. But when you talk to like OTs, these are the guys they hate blocking. They hate the guys who just are going to win leverage on you. The Elvis Dumervilles, the James Harrisons, the guys who just, you have no answer because they are underneath your pads and you physically can't get low enough. And I had the same thought as you. I'm like, how will his, whatever we see on tape against FCS, because it was just like absurdly dominant. How is it going to work though when he faces real NFL caliber offensive tackles? And the rep that sold me at the Senior Bowl was,
I saw this.
Basically, every one of his bull rush reps, he won. But he won against Anthony Belton, the NC State offensive tackle. Anthony Belton weighs 345 pounds. His bull rush had Anthony Belton doing like a cornerback back pedal all the way back into the quarterback because he's just like running with him. So if you can bull rush a 345 pounder, just put him on skis like that, I think it'll work at the NFL level just because that body type is darn near impossible to block.
Yeah, it's really interesting with these. We're going to talk about another undersized guy shortly, another undersized defensive lineman. It's such a funny like line when you're undersized as a defensive lineman between this being a disadvantage versus you actually having an advantage because of leverage. Yes. And we see it more often with defensive tackles. We're going to talk about one of them, but with an edge like this, it's just so weird to watch. I don't know how else to describe it. I do like that you highlighted the bull rush. Actually, I saw a different bull rush route. I think it was on the Purdue guy whose name is
Mo, yeah,
who's another top draft pick. And I was just like, wow, like his strength at his size and his ability to drive from that position is really remarkable. But you know, it is a very fascinating and rare combination of power and agility. His flexibility, his bend is pretty remarkable at his size. I feel like the size is going to be prohibitive for a lot of teams, at least in the first couple rounds, of course. But then it's like, who knows? Why not roll the dice?
See, I'm like mortified that he goes to the Eagles. I'm just like, they'll draft him. They will. They just had Brandon Graham. They're not going to care about the guy who's 6 foot tall. And if he does, I will cry. Draft night.
Okay, let's talk about the other short guy, Aeneas Peebles, Virginia Tech. I saw him listed at 6'1".
6 foot 3 8. That's the
okay. Yeah. All right. 290. I hope this isn't super just basic of me in terms of like comparing him to another squat guy, but he kind of reminded me of Poona Ford a little
There you
bit.
go. Yeah. Yes.
You know,
I had
is
him written
that
down here.
crazy? I mean, he looks like him out there. The way he plays, it's not just the build. Poona's like a human bowling ball. He's like Kirby.
He is the shortest
But
DT in the NFL. Yeah.
yeah, but the way, I mean, there's a lot. I'm just looking at my notes. Like a lot of, again, similarly to what we were just talking about, the way he uses his natural leverage to win, get low, and the strength. But he also, and this is something I don't think people appreciated with Ford, the quick hands and quick, violent hands, honestly. He also just like so many times, and like he's shooting through that gap before they know what the hell just happened. Like he is just like a little like boom boom out there. I don't know. So I enjoyed watching him. I do think the size is going to create some limitations. So
yeah, there's basically a path to success for these guys because it's not unprecedented. Like for defensive ends, I talked about with David Walker, he would be unprecedented. There's not guys that short really doing it at the NFL level. DTs though, Poona Ford's under 6 foot. Byron Murphy just got drafted last year, and they're almost the same height in the first round. The common thread though between all the guys who are under 6'1" at defensive tackle and playing and being impactful NFL player is that they all run pretty much like 4.8 something in the 40 or lower. Like you got to be explosive to get by at that size. And why I like Peebles, and when I flip on his tape and what I saw this past fall at Virginia Tech, I'm like, that guy's first guy off the ball every time. He gets
fast
into the backfield.
It's
exactly.
Crazy.
Like you got that first step, you got that leverage, you will make plays. I just talked to the Rams. They got like 2 of those guys on their defense, Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk, who are just like, they get off the ball low. That's what everyone's looking for at the NFL level. And especially with these stunting, blitzing, havoc creating defensive fronts, you just want that speed. You just want that. That can be a weapon without needing any other pass rushing moves, but I think he does have some, but you just want the first off the ball guy who can fire off low and just start creating havoc off the rip.
I think it's really going to come down to fit. Because with these teams that draft smaller guys like a Braden Fisk, or like, for example, even the Bucks taking Kalijah Cansey, who we talked about, well, they could do that because they have Vita Vea. You know, it's kind of like, okay, who else do you have on your defensive line who can benefit from his presence, who can compensate for some of his limitations in run defense? He's not going to go out there and 2 gap. You know, so I think it's a fit thing, but I like the sleeper potential for the right team with this guy. I really do. Okay. Darien Porter, Iowa State. We go from very small to very large. I saw him listed as 6'4". I don't think he's 6'4".
Not 6'4".
Okay, but he's big. He's a big corner.
I think he's a little over 6'2" at Senior Bowl. So
okay, he looked bigger than that. Okay, interesting. Well, he looked very tall to me. He's very tall, very rangy corner. Iowa State it was a late bloomer, I believe I saw, right? Like,
very
so
late.
What made you, other than his obvious, like his size and his height, why did you single him out?
So he's over 6'2", but he has the same wingspan as Sauce Gardner. Like he is long dude. And I wanted to talk about him, or just want to see what he does at the combine. Because one, I think he runs in the 4.2s. I saw this guy on tape and I was just like, his ability to make up ground is, I mean, it's like Tariq Woolen.
It is. I wrote Tariq Woolen. Yeah.
It's Tariq Woolen because he's also
recovery speed is remarkable.
Was his first 3 years at Iowa State a wide receiver. The guy only started playing cornerback 3 years ago, and he's barely played. I think 694 career snaps, only 425 this past year. Like the physicality of the cornerback position, like tackling, they talked about there, did not come naturally to him. He was a liability. They couldn't get him on the football field because of that. But when you just watch him man match coverage, it's like that guy has what you need. You know, he's got what you need at corner to make up ground on these superhuman wide receivers at the next level. That when you have 6'7" wingspan with 4.2 speed and the ability to move and swivel the way he does at that size, it's not like elite, but it's like good enough. This guy can be, you know, not going to go first round, but this guy can really outplay his draft position if you give him some time.
A lot of similarities to Woolen. I obviously I've watched a lot in Seattle, like including the tackling. He's not like super twitched up in terms of like you talked about his ability to play man, but because he's so long and fast, and you see this again with Woolen, even if he gets beat by sort of more sudden receiver was he's just able to make up ground so quickly. And a lot of his passes defensed aren't him literally recovering and then getting one of those go-go gadget arms out. And I think this player, Porter, it's really similar. I think the ball skills are obvious. A couple of the interceptions are insane.
Yes.
The Iowa one is the one I think that'll probably go around. But the catch rate, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I think he could probably even have more ball production because of his skills. I think, again, though, similarly to Woolen, it really is just going to be about tackling in terms of like certain teams being a little bit scared off of that. He tries, though. That yes. I will say, I could see he was like, you could see him kind of like wanting to get his nose dirty a little bit and then just like missing tackles here and there.
I think I read an article about him that said, like this year, the coaching staff was like raving about how much he was working at tackling, like that he wanted to be a better tackler. He's obviously still has a ways to go, but I mean, Tariq Woolen was as bad coming out. And I think that's why he fell the 5th round. Was just like he looked even maybe like at times like less like he wanted to be there. And then obviously you're never going to turn to a great tackler, but if you go to a scheme where you're playing maybe a lot of man or man concepts, like you're not as involved in the running game.
Yeah. Yeah. No, oh gosh, Pete Carroll with the Raiders now, maybe looking at him, and he's such a Pete Carroll type archetype, right? Yeah. And they need corners. So that could be a great mid-round pick for a team like that for sure to get some value. All right, so the final player is the one I didn't get a chance to watch. So which was Demetrius Knight, South Carolina, who is off-ball linebacker. So I haven't gotten to that position yet. The only one I've seen is Campbell, really, out of Bama, who I'm pretty sure is most people's LB1. Mm-hmm. Let's start here. Where do you have this guy stacked up amongst linebackers and why?
I think he's going to be my LB2 when it's all said and done, because behind G.I. Campbell, who's awesome. G.I. Campbell stays great.
Whew, yeah.
I think everyone's going to just be like, he's good. But Knight, little different animal. He is unique, dude. I'll just go through his background first, because he never played snap a linebacker in high school. He was a triple option quarterback that committed to Georgia Tech to Paul Johnson to play quarterback. And after he signed his letter of intent, Paul Johnson retires. And so they honored his scholarship at Georgia Tech, but he's like, I only know how to play quarterback. We're not doing triple option anymore. That's what I came here for. So they're like, okay, play linebacker. He almost quit. 4 years at Georgia Tech, doesn't ever start a single game. He's just learning how to play the position. Transfers to Charlotte, transfers to South Carolina. He's going to be 25 years old in July. He's an old player. This past year, though, he found out how to play linebacker. It's like some of these guys, like a Devondre Campbell, where it's like, oh, he figured it out. You watch him this year, like this guy figured it out because he is so built, so low to the earth. He's 6'1", 246, but he has a 6'8" wingspan. So he can like really impact a lot of different things outside his frame. He can take on blocks. And this guy hits harder than anyone else in this draft class. Mm-hmm. I mean, he wants to lower the boom. He had a play where Jalen Milroe, the Alabama quarterback's like scrambling out left, and it's one-on-one, him and Jalen Milroe. He never slowed down. He truly like accelerated the entire time into Jalen Milroe, and I think Milroe was like expecting him to at some point break down. He could put a move on him, and he just like body slammed him. The guy has no fear and hits like a 1990s NFL blitz linebacker. So that's everyone that flips on his tapes just like, yeah, it's awesome. Like it's just like I want this guy on my football team. That's the kind of linebacker you want.
Can he cover?
Yes. So that's what I'm kind of looking at. They said his GPS numbers were good. On tape, I'm like, I don't see great. I think he's just like.
But how often?
I wrote down
college linebackers, right?
I wrote down mid 4.6s. Fred Warner's mid 4.6. You can get it done at that. But he just needs to play more football at this point. I mean, 2 years as a starter, he still needs to play more. But from what I see, the guy loves to play the game of football, and that's the kind of linebacker I want.
How do you feel generally about like drafting linebackers early these days?
If you draft one early, I think the only guys I draft early at linebacker are Jihad Campbells, who are good blitzing
Yeah.
linebackers. Guys who have that as a plus skill.
Trait that you can,
It's just hard to really project from the collegiate game to the NFL consistently, as we've seen.
Yeah.
And there's enough guys that go in the third and fourth that end up being good players. That's just like, hey, you could draft one in the first 2 rounds. I just don't think it's the position that necessitates it. And truthfully, so many guys in free agency, like it takes so long. It's like quarterback in terms of development for these linebackers at the NFL level.
Yes.
I'm going by like the Zach Bond method, the Drew Tranquil method. Just get a 5th-year guy to like a $7 million deal, and he'll probably be better than that rookie first rounder you just drafted.
Totally. I think just because the position is so devalued in the NFL and the developmental arc is so long compared to the other positions, you're better off generally with free agents. But I agree with you, Campbell, who he's probably the only one I'm going to really talk about in depth when I do defense on this pod. It is the exception. Like he's just really, really good football player. Okay, well, I'm excited to watch him. Look, listen, running on Jalen Milrow is no easy task. So that'll probably be the game that I put on first. This has been really fun. I am really excited to see a lot of these players work out. Excited to see you in Indianapolis. Safe travels, Mike. And hopefully next year we will be talking about Harold Fannin Jr. and Sean Payton's offense catching 8 touchdowns.
Oh, I hope so. It'd be so much fun. Can't wait to see you in Indy. Bye.